Hi, everyone. This is Mason Christensen, archivist at the Dearborn Historical Museum. Today I'm going to talk about some of the early railroad stations in Dearborn using historical photos and video I took very close to where I live today. Dearborn's first mapped train station would have been right about at this spot, just south of West Village Drive, between Howard Street and Mason Street. Around here, back in late 1837, the first train service on the Michigan Central Railroad would have arrived in Dearborn. You would have had the first trains going between Detroit and Ypsilanti stopping here. Dearborn's more well-known Victorian era train station was built in the same location as its predecessor between Howard Street and Mason Street, north of the Michigan Central Railroad, in the whole West Village condos area. Dearborn's Victorian train station, built in 1886, sadly closed during the 1910s and was replaced with a freight train station built closer to Howard Street. Sadly, that train station was nowhere near as nice looking, had fairly limited passenger facilities. A big reason why is because by this point, there was a fair amount of interurban traffic in the area, which is basically commuter rail service. Passenger service did continue to stop at the freight station near West Village Drive and Howard Street till at least around 1950. During World War II, you had a lot of people drafted into the Army or volunteering for the Army who would have left on trains from that station. But as time went on, train service went down. In 1949, newspaper article reported that there was only one train stopping each day at the station in each direction. It also, the same article talked about how the station was really dirty in the inside, and it only had like one spittoon and a wash basin for comforts, plus like one chair. The station finally was converted into businesses and then was eventually torn down in 1963 for parking. Before I move on to talking about interurbans, I wanted to mention that around Howard Street and West, you had a rail yard, you had a lot of rail-related facilities such as coal sheds, there was an oil storage area, there was an ice plant, a lot of kind of rail-related buildings that were, by mid-century, completely torn down. Because these areas were completely torn down, it left room for all sorts of parking to serve the West Downtown Dearborn area, and that's why you now have two garages west of Howard Street along West Village Drive. Interurban service actually came to Dearborn as early as 1897 with the coming of the Detroit, Ypsilanti, and Ann Arbor Railway. What this meant was that for the first time, Dearborn really had like great train service to Detroit because interurbans were effectively the commuter rail version of an electrified streetcar. It meant for the first time that for a fairly low price, Dearbornites could just board these giant streetcars, ride into Detroit, and ride back with a fair amount of convenience because on average, these streetcars would have run, anywhere from 15 minutes to every half hour. So it was really, this period when interurbans are coming through, it's really some of the best public transit service that Dearborn's ever going to get to Detroit. Dearborn's first interurban train station was actually on the south side of Michigan Avenue, a few doors west of Mason Street. Trains stopped there for a few years, but by the time the Detroit United Railways took over interurbans, the station had actually moved across from the Wagner Hotel on the north side of Michigan Avenue, just a few doors west of Monroe Street. Sadly, interurban train service would not last in Dearborn forever. By 1929, interurbans were phased out because car traffic was increasing. After interurban train service and passenger train service ended in Dearborn, it took until 1978 for another train station to open in the city. At that point, Amtrak opened service to Dearborn at a stop near the Henry Ford Centennial Library and Dearborn Police Station. It was originally a temporary structure. Very quickly, a more permanent building was built there. That lasted for decades, was one of the most popular stops on the Amtrak line between Detroit and Chicago. And finally, in 2014, the current structure, the John Dingell Transit Center, was open to the public.